Hi, State Rep Summer Lee. How are you?
I'm all right, surviving a pandemic and trying to help others survive their pandemic.
How's the family? How's everyone doing during this time?
Good. So my grandma has been here the whole time because I made her stay. She flew in for a funeral. We wouldn't let her fly back out. Mr. Grandpa got stuck in Vegas, so he's actually on his way home right now.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, good, good. I'm glad everybody's okay. So first I want to say thank you for taking time out of your day to come and educate us with this educational community civic series with Western Power. We what we do is we have been doing this now for for a little over 6 years because we found the need of letting our communities know the importance of the everyday offices that affect our lives 365 days a year, and that is the local offices with local elections. So we want to make sure that everyone knows this, and we want to say thank you again for coming to educate us. So,
Thank you for having me.
absolutely, absolutely. So, first and foremost, Miss Summer Lee, who are you?
Yeah, so I am. I don't know. That's such a funny question, right? Because the instinct is that people would think that I would go straight to, I'm the state representative for 34th legislative district, which is like the Mon Valley, some of the eastern suburbs and East End. But I'm more than that. I am a resident of the Mon Valley. I'm somebody who grew up there, so the Mon Valley kid. I'm a Black woman who's been fighting, really for economic justice and environmental justice and educational equity, and just really trying to end cyclical racism and cyclical inequality. That's a huge part of my identity, and that's kind of who I see myself as. I'm an organizer, an advocate, and I'm also a TT.
Yes, your little nephew. That is right. Okay. So thank you for that. Thank you for that because, and I'm glad that you educated us on that we are way more than one or two things. So I'm glad you elaborated on that. And you said your state. You named a couple of your communities in your district, District 34. And how many communities do you represent?
Yeah. So I have 12 boroughs. If you'd like me to name them, I'm happy to. I have Braddock, Rankin, North Braddock, Forest Hills, Turtle Creek, Homestead, West Homestead, Chalfont, Swissvale, Churchill, Braddock Hills. I also have one township, so I have Wilkins Township. And then I have one whole ward of the city. So I have Ward 31, which includes Lincoln Place, Hayes, and New Homestead. And I also have two partial wards. So I have part of 14th and part of 15th, which is about Squirrel Hill South, some of Hazelwood, some of Greenfield. So I have a really diverse and expansive district. Like I have a district that, includes suburb and city. I have a district that has some of the Mon Valley. I have a district that has, lower socioeconomic neighborhoods and more affluent neighborhoods like, Churchill and Forest Hills and Squirrel Hill. I have Black folks in parts of my district, and I have white folks and people and other folks of color, so I have a pretty diverse district. I think it's kind of a microcosm of Allegheny County, really.
Mm-hmm. Wow, thank you for that. See, this educational community civic series is all about, because I did not know that you had some Hazelwood. I did not know that. I did not know that. Thank you for that.
Yeah. So fun fact though. So fun fact. Like I have a part of Hazelwood. I don't have nearly as much of Hazelwood as Jake Wheatley has.
But yeah, because that's who I thought all of Hazelwood.
And when I was knocking doors like 2 years ago, a lot of people, like I knocked on a door of a relative. And this relative, I didn't know he was my relative at the time, right? I'm knocking doors in Hazelwood, and his wife let me in. And then he was like, what are you doing here? Can't you see we're busy? But they were like Wheatley supporters. And when I left, I was like, okay, so I just left. And my mom called me. She's like, are you in Hazelwood? I was like, yeah. She's like, you were at our cousin's house. He's sorry. He said, come back. All of his neighbors had Jake Wheatley signs because they thought Jake Wheatley was their rep. But also, literally across the street was Jake Wheatley's district. So it is very hard to know. But this is the way I see it. Like, and it sucks though. But you gotta think gerrymandering. People think gerrymandering is just like political gerrymandering. Like it's a Democrat gerrymander or it's a Republican gerrymander. But there's also a racial gerrymander. And Jake Wheatley and Ed Gainey's districts have been created, and they haven't been created, but they've been maintained to keep, the fact that they are majority Black districts. And because of that, and as demographics change, to ensure that Black folks still have, fair representation, essentially those districts have been created to remain Black. So when you look at like our rough lines of like where we are, we cut off in Hazelwood, but he has much, many of the Black residents in Hazelwood.
Oh,
and
wow.
That has been created. And you can see that with Ed Gainey's district too. In a lot of places, where he borders other districts like Sarah Morato's district, she literally will have the white side of the street, and he'll have the Black side of the street. So that happens a lot, kind of frequently with some of our city reps.
See, this is the importance of learning our civic series. This is why we have to continue to do what we do. Because who would have known that? When you said Hazelwood, I was like, wait, Hazelwood. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. Let me ask you, I remember you had put in legislation for the use of force law. How's that going? Where's that at? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we put in so it was a journey. I like to think of our use of force bill, not as just the bill by itself, but really as a movement, because the bill was kind of like a culmination of the movement that had been created. Obviously for us in our area, really kind of around Antoine Rose, but also thinking about just like a lot of the situations that we've been seeing since Ferguson, since Mike Brown and all these other, young folks and people of color who have been killed. When we put the legislation in, I believe we put that bill in on Juneteenth last year, which I think I believe it was Juneteenth that we put it in. So like the anniversary of Antoine's killing. So it's been about a year almost since we've introduced it. We had, of course, our rally April 30th last year, right before that. So it was all coming up to it. Where we're at, we're still fighting. We've had meetings we had our policy hearing, me and Ed Gainey. We had a policy hearing last year in Hawkins Village, which is the first of its kind to ever have a policy hearing like that in public housing, where the folks who are most impacted by a situation, bringing my colleagues to them instead of us always having to accommodate them. So we did that. We had one police chief come, Chief Komorowski. He, I believe, broke ranks to come to speak to us. We did reach out to the FOP, we reached out to the police chiefs, we reached out to the state troopers. None of them were able to come in person. Me and Rep. Gainey have had conversations with those organizations. However, we've had meetings with them in Harrisburg. Attorney General Josh Shapiro, who's brought all of these different groups and interest groups and the Black legislators who are all part of our package together to have a conversation about this. And we're at a stalemate. They don't necessarily agree with all of the things that we're asking for, that we're demanding. And it's important right now more than ever that we keep kind of putting that pressure on them, because the reality is that one man can control whether or not we come up for a vote. Our bill comes up for a vote. And it hasn't yet. Our bill hasn't even been referred to a committee yet. So that's a huge problem when it comes to passing legislation. So we've not been brought up for a committee vote, which means that we have not been brought up for a floor vote, which means that nobody has to, go on a record on where they stand on community safety. So that's what we're pushing for. That's what we're still pushing for. But, we have 2-year sessions. So this session doesn't expire until November 30th.
Okay. And thank you for that, because that was powerful when you, when you and Rep. Gainey and your constituents went to Hawkins Village, and because what we been saying here at our educational community civic series is there's so many times when things are being done about us and for us and not with us.
Yes. So
that was very powerful right there, bringing the community that has been affected to the table to hear their concerns and just to listen, so that was very powerful. Thank you.
Really, that was flipping it. We're always expected to come to their table, to be brought to their table. What we really did was brought them to our table.
Yeah.
This is our table that we've created. This is our space. And you, as our elected officials, as our public servants, whether they be the elected ones or our police officers, you have a responsibility to come to us in our space, in our tables. So that's what we really were trying to do, is flip that script.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can honestly say, do something as powerful as that. I think that was accomplished. Of course, it's a marathon. So it's still work to be done. So
Hmm.
I'm glad of that. Thank you for that. I also want to ask you about that because you also led on House Bill 1459 with the wellness and stress management for emergency responders. What tell us a little bit about that.
So no, actually, you'd have to give me more information on that. That's the funny thing about this, right? You had to give me more information. It's so crazy, right? Because so many
I
people, when they
love it.
throw bill
Yeah.
numbers at us,
Uh,
we voted on so many things. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't always remember exactly what it is.
so what? Yeah. So the House Bill 1459, you took a strong stance on getting mental health services to our first responders, the
Yep.
people
Okay.
who's
Yep.
on the
I know
front
what you're
line.
talking about. You know what though? That's an important bill, but the representative who actually stood up on that one and
Mhm.
really kind of moved me was Representative Dan Miller. He
Okay.
used to be a firefighter, and he shared with us while we were voting on that and doing our floor debate on that. He shared kind of the situations that he had been in, and that's his story to tell. But the situations that he had been in, that really led to him realizing like what how trauma informed care is needed, what PTSD looks like for folks who
Wow.
are in emergent situations, who deal in emergency situations and trauma. And yeah, it was really moving because when you think about EMTs and first responders and the folks who kind of are always operating in trauma,
Hmm.
whether it be long-term trauma or just like one incident, one event, one situation that can still have lasting impacts for them. They do that's a lot of burden to carry to always be working in that. So making sure that the people who do this work get the care that they need, um, have mental health coverage, that they have time off, whatever it is that they need to cope. I mean, that is important for EMTs, for first responders, of course, but we need to really start looking at how we need to implement that community-wide too,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's not just first responders who need that same care, who need that same attention, when it comes to dealing with their traumas and working in traumatic situations. So yeah, that is a really important bill, but I'm grateful for Representative Miller for sharing with us kind of that perspective.
Yeah, yes, I will have to, when I see him, thank him for that as well, because that is a very important. And I'm glad that you said it should, you're hoping that it can go even further into the communities. Because I wanted to talk to you about essential workers, our essential workers. And I'll be the first one to tell you that I did not give the respect to the person, the man or woman that was stocking the shelves or mopping the floor after the doctor and nurse got done with the surgery. Or so I'll be the first, to tell you, yes, I was guilty of that. And um, my love and respect and hat goes off to them for the rest of my life now. Even my mom has a aide that comes in. It's just they're putting their life on the front line. So I'm glad that you said that, because I wanted to ask you, at a state level, what what could should be done with our essential workers that is literally saving our lives right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. So I think it's so important just where you started, because we have to first recognize that all workers are essential. Every single worker is essential. They do something that is integral to their lives or the lives of our society as a whole, maybe just the lives of their communities, the lives of their household, but it is essential to our economy, it's essential to our society, it's essential to our culture. Everybody is important. All work is important. But aside from that, you are also important outside of your work title. You are important whether you are working currently or you're unemployed. And that's in our society, and in a capitalistic society, we have been trained to believe that our worth is directly tied to how much money we make, or to our production level, or to how valuable we are, in a system of supply and demand. And that's not true. And if the one good thing that comes out of this pandemic is for us to recognize that we are more than workhorses, we are more than our productivity level or our ability to produce. We need to learn that now, because that means that the people we've not been valuing are the most vulnerable people, or the people who are so critical to our lives, our disability community, our elderly, our Black and brown folks. So that's why it is important that we as a state legislature move immediately to make sure that we are not fighting to get back to normal. You know, a certain level, normalcy should not be our societal aspiration right now, because normal did leave out those people. It did leave out and sacrifice our disabled. It leaves out and it sacrifices the people who we consider lower than us. You know, we've been trained in capitalism to believe that somebody has to be doing worse than you, which means that they are lesser than you. But we recognize now that that's not true. Our food stockers, our sanitation workers, they make society go around too. So the protections that I believe that all workers should be having, all workers are essential, so all workers should have essential pay. That's a living wage. And I know that we're still talking about a fight for 15. Fight for 15 is like bare minimum. You know, fight for 15 is so 15 years ago. You know, if we're being real, you know, we need to really have moved to more like $21, $22 an hour to survive. When we think about housing, you know, we're thinking about the very people right now who are risking themselves in a pandemic are now going home to houses that they might not be able to afford. You know, with the rent is too high because of gentrification, because of the housing market. We're talking about folks who work at the grocery stores, but maybe can't even afford the groceries that they need because of their pay. You know, we're talking about nursing, you know, nurses and home care workers who love their jobs. They love their jobs, but those are stressful jobs. They're mentally and physically taxing. And then at the end of the day, they don't even have health insurance. They work in health, but don't have health insurance. So I believe that every worker, all of our essential workers right now at the state level and at the federal level, we should be moving toward a universal health care for all system. You should not only have health care, and your health care should not be derived from your employment status, because right now we have 1.7 million Pennsylvanians since March who have applied for unemployment. That's 1.7 million people who never thought that they'd be in the food line. Then, you know, they never thought that it would be their car at the, you know, at the Greater Food Bank in Duquesne. You know, they were the people who never thought that, you know, they wouldn't be able to meet their rent or their mortgage on May 1st, on June 1st. You know, those are the very people who had never thought that they would rely on public assistance. But in America, we all one paycheck away. You know, we are all one paycheck, one disaster, one situation, one illness away from utter disaster. We need safeguards against that. So universal health care for all. We need paid sick and family leave. When this pandemic first started, it would not have spread as much if we didn't have a culture, especially within Black communities, poor communities, Black and brown folks. We are accustomed to having to go to work through sickness, you know, through death and disaster, through grief, through trauma, because we can't afford to miss work, not one day. We can afford to sit home when bills still need to be paid. We can't even afford childcare. If we had health care for all and we had paid family and sick leave, then those workers would know that when they had that cough, it's worth it for all of us societally to stay home, and they wouldn't fear that they wouldn't be able to feed their families or keep the roof over their heads. So paid sick and family leave, hazard pay, of course. You do dangerous work, you deserve more money, and you deserve a safe working environment. So worker protections. Every worker, every essential worker deserves a union protection and union representation. So that's something that we need to move toward. But those are all things that we were fighting for before the pandemic. Those are things that we need to move toward coming out of it if we are going to come out of it, you know, as a better society than we are now.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because right now union protection is so needed. You know, that's a whole nother level of safety that is needed in our communities. I want to switch it to our criminal justice system. So, are there conversations or have there been conversations about, because right now we have a span of men and women 10, 20, 40, 60 years coming home. What safety nets can the state provide of a simple foundation of maybe too much rent, 3 months rent, or so? Because right now there's organizations that if you're addicted to, or if if you have an addiction, they will pay. Thankfully, they will pay your help you with your utilities and rent. But for our men and women, you know, coming home, what foundation, what safety nets are being talked about that you could share with us right now?
Sis, you know that this particular question is the conversation that you and I could have and should have and that we would need to have for so much longer than this. But let's work with it and with the time that we have, right? So the problem that we have with our criminal justice system is that it is inherently flawed. It's incorrigible. The way that we say that some people who go within the system are incorrigible is the system itself that is. It's the system itself that needs indicted. And returning citizens and the way that they're met in society and set up, you know, to go back into society is the biggest evidence that we have of an incorrigible system. So what we have right now, you know, is a cultural issue that meets a systemic issue. We have folks who, in a society that has been led to believe that there is just something inherently wrong with some people and that they should be perpetually punished, you know, and disproportionately punished, no matter what they did, no matter what the perceived offense was, because, you know what, criminals should just be punished. And we've convinced ourselves that it's okay to basically sentence people to never be able to get back on track, to never be able to get their lives together or reclaim some sort of dignity and honor. So when you see folks who are returning after 40, 30, or 50 years, incarcerated, people who have been denied the opportunity to enrich themselves while incarcerated. When we went up to Cambridge Springs, we talked to geriatric, that's what we call them, geriatric prisoners. Women who were, the oldest one, 80 years old, 78 to 80 years old. These women who, they just wanted books. They wanted to be able to take online courses. These are women who are mature. They have now served, they've been in this prison environment for the majority of their life, and they have made something of even that situation. They've been mentoring the young girls who come in. They've been still mentoring and serving as part of their families as best they can. And they've matured and they have zero recidivism rate. And yet they still can't get books. They still can't avail themselves of programs that would help them or that would keep them sane and healthy. They still, you know, they're still denied literally basic things that we need, that humans need for hope, for enrichment, things of that nature. And then if they were to get a sense of commutation, if they were to even, you know, just time out on their sentence, then we send them home and we're expecting them to be okay. They've not worked in a real environment in 40, 50 years. You know, they have no money to their name. They had no bank account. You know, in the jails, they can make 10 cents an hour, 20 cents an hour. How could they make a living at that point? How do they now, having made 10 cents an hour, 20 cents an hour, go out into the public and get rent and afford rent? You know, these are folks who have not had to fill out a job application. These are folks who don't have up-to-date clothes, you know, that fit them. These are people who may not even have a support network, because if you've been in jail, if you're an 80-year-old woman in jail now, a lot of your family members may have died. You know, your support net, they may have died, they may have moved on, they may not even live on this side of the country or the world anymore. And then we send them out and we expect them to succeed. You know, that is a failing of our society. So there are a lot of things that we should be doing differently. First of all, on the front end, we should be doing things differently. If we were meeting societal needs, creating opportunity in communities like ours, where people are more inclined to even come in contact with the judiciary system because their schools are failing, because it's $7.25 minimum wage that hasn't increased, because of a dearth of opportunities, because of environmental justice hazards, then they come in contact with the system and we're blaming them for societal issues. So that's
I had to ask because the people need to know. You know, the people do.
But that's the way. But you know, I think the biggest thing that we need to do, yes, there are things at the state level that we should be doing to set them up better. First of all, we need to be letting a lot of them out. We need to end cash bail, because these are people who have not even been convicted of a crime. But for the folks who have been serving long term, they should all have a fair shot. No one should be dying. Death by incarceration is cruel and inhumane. In fact, we're about the only country in the world that even still has such a system. And then when we think about the juvenile justice system, we were the only country in the world that still had juvenile death by incarceration. We still have it. People think that we don't anymore because of a 2012 Supreme Court case, Miller versus Alabama. But that doesn't get rid of juvenile life without parole. It gets rid of mandatory juvenile life without parole, which means that there are kids, especially in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, a Black kid was 20 times more likely to be sentenced by death without parole, you know, death by incarceration, than a white child. About 12% of them were going down for accomplice liability, which means that these are kids who were just in the getaway car. They were, you know, outside while someone else went in and did a burglary and killed someone. And that child is sentenced to die in jail, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, to die in jail. Philadelphia has the highest incarceration rate in about the world. That's Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
So those are all issues that we have just societally, and how we value people, how we value people who we believe are damaged, or, you know, what we call them, at risk. And that's a different question. We need to talk about the state system, but we also need to talk about us, you know, what as a community, and how as a community we should look at people and view people. But this is not right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for that, because what makes us on the out, you know, in communities feel better is knowing that the people that is speaking for us and working for us is understanding that this is not right, that something is wrong and that needs to be addressed. So thank you for that. My next question is the LGBTQ community. They have fought the fight, and they have won some big victories. What can be done to make sure that they stay winning their victories, and they're not, and what they have won is not rolled back?
Yeah. And look, even put in perspective that for as many victories that the LGBTQ plus community has won, that in Pennsylvania, in any given jurisdiction, they may still be allowed to be evicted from their homes because of their sexuality, their gender expression, their gender orientation. They can be fired still in Pennsylvania. So we are still a little bit backwards with that. And by a little bit, I mean, we are criminally backwards with that. But I think, to answer your question, the number one thing that we can do to ensure that that community, that their rights are preserved and that we move forward and the fight, you know, for liberation for all of us, is to ensure that they're in positions of power. You know, we talked about that table. We talked about the fact that, you know, we're always, it's always us who's supposed to take the step or to fight, to scrape, to bring up a folding chair at somebody else's table. But the reality is that they need their own tables. They need to be in every decision-making space. They need to be in leadership, whether it be public health, government, foundation communities, nonprofits. We need better representation in those spaces, because that's where the real things are happening. So when we're thinking about at state level, for instance, we only have 2 openly LGBTQ folks in the state house, period. The first one, and of the 2 of them, they are both the first in some way. Ryan Sims, who was the first openly gay man ever, I believe, and Malcolm Kenyatta, my colleague, who's also a freshman with me, is the first Black gay man. That's it. That's all we have. So they are now tasked with basically being the face of the whole community for them. Yeah. You know, in that leadership capacity. So they need to be represented, because as people make laws that deal with them, just like with us in the Black community, whereas people make laws that deal with us, they create policies that impact us, whether it be on purpose, you know, or unintentionally, but disproportionately. We need to be there to offset that, to share and to help them avail themselves of our perspective and our experiences and the way we navigate society. That is the number one way that we can start to secure rights and liberation for people, is making sure that they are there in capacities to lead, to create, to sustain, and to fight more effectively.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And see, I didn't even know that. See, this we always learn, and I did not know that. Okay. So let me ask you this. How can your community members, your constituents, how can someone, because you have an office in Harrisburg, you have one here in Pittsburgh, how can someone get in touch with you even after June 2nd? How can someone get in touch with you, ask you some questions, or just, yeah.
So, you're right. I have my office, which is in Braddock. My office is, I believe, 501 Braddock Avenue, which, if you're familiar with the area, is right across the street from Bracero Grill, which is a great taco joint that if you come down, you should go. You should definitely
shout out,
right? The tacos are amazing. Please go and support those brothers. They're doing great work. So right across the street from Bracero. It's across the street the other way from where the old UPMC Braddock hospital used to be, almost very fittingly. So that's where our office is located. Obviously, with coronavirus crisis, we're not physically in our office consistently, or not open to the public, though as Allegheny County moves into more safe, you know, practices and opening up and more safely, we're going to be figuring out how we can also do that. But they can call us If they leave a message, my staff, every single day, every single work day, they're checking those messages, they're calling people back, and they're still helping people. So our phone number is 412-273-3400. If you just leave a message, Tawanza or Daniel or Mary or Josh will get back with you, and they're great. You can also hit us at our email. So replee@pahouse.net is our communal kind of email for the office. But also if you're looking for me kind of in a personal or even professional, my social media, you can come to it. My Facebook page where a lot of folks already are. My Twitter is Summer for PA. Please come to my Twitter. I'm always happy to engage people. If you want to call, if it's not important, I call people, I call constituents sometimes when they're like, we want to know why you did this. And I'll call them up. We'll have a conversation about it because that is important. It's so important that we make ourselves available because I'm just the person who represents you. I'm not the ruler. I'm not the royal. I am your representative. I'm your voice in Harrisburg. So it's important that I know how you all think and view things, but also that how I'm viewing things and what information I'm viewing it. So conversations, Facebook, Twitter, you can always hit me there. Email summer.elle23@gmail.com. It's my personal, so they can reach me at any of those places. But anytime you're in Swissville, they can also just come around.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that. And last but not least, can you let us know, today was the last day to register to vote. What do they do? What do we need to do to get a mail-in ballot? Mm-hmm. What's the website, deadline, etc.?
Yes.
And yeah.
So we are on a race against time now. Tomorrow will be 2 weeks out from Election Day. So if you're not already registered, you now have until, nope, I'm sorry, you're done. 5 o'clock has already come. You cannot apply you can't apply to register to vote right now, though you can for November. So please still get registered so that you're ready for November if you missed the primary. But for mail-in ballots, that's going to be so critical right now, Terry. You can go to votespa.com. So VOTESPA.com. Where you can access your mail-in ballot. You could check your status of your ballot. It'll send it right to your house when you apply for it. But yeah, you just click on the application. You let them know that you're not a robot. And then you fill out your application and it's very easy. If you're not somebody who has internet access or somebody who just, this is confusing. There are paper ballots. Paper ballots were mailed to every single registered voter in the county. So check your mailboxes for those. Those have come. I know a lot of people think that they got a ballot when in reality, they actually got an application. You need to get your application in by May 26th. May 26th, you need to get your application in. And as long as you get it in before then, you then will have until Election Day. So you'll have until 8 p.m. on June 2nd to get your mail-in ballot submitted at the Board of Elections office in downtown Pittsburgh. If you apply for your mail-in ballot and you, for some whatever reason, choose to not vote by mail, you can still vote in person, but you're going to have to vote by provisional ballot. So you're really going to want to get that ballot in once you apply for it. Just know that voting in person is going to be much harder. We have gone from 1,300 to only 138 polling places. That's a consolidation of over 90%. That's going to hit hardest the city area, where they have 32 wards, but only around 20 polling places. Larger municipalities. So if you live in like Penn Hills or Monroeville or communities like that, you only have one polling place, which is the same number as a communities like Chalfont, which is accustomed to only having one. So there's not any equity there. And we are worried about senior citizens, and people in marginalized communities and vulnerable communities. So your disabled people who are immobile, they may not have cars, or we want to make sure that we're reaching them. So please let them know that they can apply for their mail-in ballot. That is a safe and secure way to vote. That I turned in my ballot today, y'all. So I would not tell you to do it if I didn't trust it. I turned mine and my mom's ballot in, and it's important that I vote for me. So please, it is safe and secure. We want to make sure that your voice is heard. We also want to make sure that you're not risking your life or standing in lines unnecessarily or being unnecessarily inconvenienced or disenfranchised.
Yes, thank you for that. And I also wanted to piggyback off of what you said, how safe it was, because right now, some hear this not safe, some hear that you can mail in 2 ballots, some hear, you know what I'm saying? So I'm glad that you commented on how safe it is. And so.
If you got a minute, I will explain that. Look,
yes,
the system,
please.
It's a glitchy system. You have to recognize this is a new process. We never had vote by mail before in Pennsylvania. It's brand new. We just voted on it And it wasn't even a good bill. I'm not going to lie. It was not a good bill, but mail-in ballots are a good thing. We are dealing with the problem of a pandemic at the same time, a presidential year, and a very new voting system. So there's going to have to be some room, for grace, for adjustment. We expect, some level of glitch or problems, but I don't want you to think that that's a problem more than it is. If you receive 2 ballots, that's okay. You cannot vote twice. Even if you sent them in, both of them in, there's a unique number that once you turn it in, that number is registered. It cannot be used again. So you can only vote one time, folks, only one time. No one will be voting twice. Whether it'll make it or not, whether someone can tamper with it. Actually, voting machines are easily hacked. Paper ballots are actually more secure than voting machines. So please just bear with them. They're working to get them out. We're going to have a little patience. Because it's like any other new process, but also amplified by a pandemic. So it is safe and it is secure.
Okay.
It's annoying and a little bit slow.
Yeah. But like you said, this is new. It's coming with during a pandemic, a global pandemic. So thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. And we want to thank you. We want to thank you so much for taking out your time. Is there anything that you would like to say before we go with our educational community civic series that maybe we did not touch on? I did not get a chance to ask. We have all the time in the world. If there's anything that you would like to say,
don't tell me that. Oh, this was awesome. I think that these are so important. What you're doing is super important, but it matches what we're trying to do. Like, it's what we are trying to do, because the reality is that, people always say that, our people died for the right to vote. And I say that's not true. And that ruffles some feathers sometimes. I'm like, my people didn't die for me to have the right to vote, for one person who hates me and another person for hating me. They died for us to have access to power. It's important that we recognize that voting is a tool. It is a method to an end, to the means to the end, but it is not the end. The end game was never just to be able to vote. The end game was to be able to have control over communities, to have autonomy, to have liberation. And electoral politics is a way to do that. But what we need to do is empower each other. I told one brother yesterday, as I was trying to get my neighbor registered, he was like, "Oh, it don't matter, it's rigged anyways." I was like, "Look, brother, there are 203 state reps. If there were 203 of you, if every seat was you, what would our society look like?" That's how we have to view this. Yeah. One rep cannot do a lot. Though there's a lot we can do. We can advocate, we can bring a new perspective, we can fight, but we need help. One rep can't do it all. One rep, one leader, one elected, one candidate will never be your savior. Don't make them your savior. But we do have to use this. So I just want people, if they're watching this, to recognize the power that we have in our communities, the power that we have in our own households, to really start to move things, to make sure and fight now more than ever. We have to make sure that we're not going back to normal. Back to normal is the reason why Black folks are dying disproportionately from COVID. It's the reason why Black folks, where, the unemployment rate is what it is, you can assure and be guaranteed that Black folks' unemployment rate is higher. When we're thinking about health disparities, when we're thinking about all these issues, we don't want to go back to that. We don't want to go back to normal. We don't want to go back to a system where our workers are not respected and protected. We want to move forward, and this is the time that we can do that, but we have to do that together. So we need to come up with our own candidates. We need to come up with our own community groups to run those candidacies and to fight. We need to co-govern. We need people who want to go to office to work with us, to bring us with them wherever they may go. And we absolutely have the power to do that. And West Empower, this is one way that we are doing that. So I just want to amplify the work that you're doing, talk about just how critical it is, and kind of really wish that we had this exact thing just everywhere. We need this all throughout Pittsburgh as we're building power, especially for marginalized communities. So this is incredible. But remember, it's not just about your vote. It isn't. It's about who we send. It's about who is coming to us. It's about how we're interacting with politics and engaging in politics. Don't let people convince you that this place is so toxic that you shouldn't engage. That's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They want us to believe that this isn't a space for good people, or that this isn't a space for people who really want to make change. As long as they can convince us to stay away, then they can continue their toxic cycle. They can continue to oppress us. They can continue to control us. So we do got to get in there. And we do have to see it for what it is. But don't be discouraged. Don't be discouraged by the negativity in politics. Don't be discouraged by how hard things feel. We have the power to change that. We have the answer within our communities and our homes.
There we have it, State Rep Summer Lee. Thank you so much for taking out the time with us. We could not be more than gracious and just overwhelmed with your wisdom. And again, thank you for joining us with our Educational Community Civic Series.